one around. God came and spoke these words to me. Praise will confuse the enemy. I've had my share of ups and downs, times when there was no one around. God came and spoke these words to me. Praise will confuse the enemy. So I started singing. I started singing. I started clapping. I started dancing. People were laughing. They knew my problem. They knew my pain. But I knew God would take him away. I've had my share of ups and downs, times when there was no one around. God came and spoke these words to me. Praise will confuse the enemy. So I started singing. I started singing. I started clapping. I started dancing. People were laughing. They knew my problem. They knew my pain. But I knew God would take him away. That's why I praise him with my hands. it's offering time. If you need an envelope, raise your hand. Thank you for a great job. If you need an envelope, raise your hand. All right, announcements as follows. Wednesday night Bible study. If you want to eat, please be here at 6:30. The food will be put up at 7. Immediately following the Bible study at 8 o'clock. We'll have a choir rehearsal. Asking everybody who wants to sing in the choir to please come out at 8 o'clock.
Thanksgiving in our hearts, Father. Just thank you for the gifts that you've been able to give us, and thank you for the gift you just of course you back. This Heavenly Father, this morning we ask that we be good stewards over what you've given us, Father, that we may use it to uplift your kingdom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right, do we have Juice Crew this morning? Juice Crew dismissed. Juice Crew dismissed. No teams today. Nursery. Can y'all handle nursery, fellas? All right. Immediately following service today, I want to meet with Sister White, and I want to meet with Sister Dory, and Sister Monica Johnson. Need to meet with all three of you guys right after service. Oh, and Sister Adrian. I'm sorry, Sister Harris. Yeah, you. All four of them. Sorry, brother. Sister Harris, Sister Doherty, Sister Johnson, Monica Johnson, and Sister Nicole White. These meetings all for you guys right after service. 3 minutes.
Did he say he's in that box?
Why, Frank?
Romans chapter 1, verse 16 and 17. Romans chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. You found it, please, Father.
James, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also for the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. Amen. Amen. Seated. Continuing in our series, The Roman Road, we are at the end of the introduction to the letter. And Paul is going to conclude with a discussion on faith. And today we want to talk about faith to faith and more faith. Faith to faith and more faith. Anyone here ever been ashamed of anything? You ever been ashamed? What do you do when you're ashamed? You try to cover it up. That's why they make makeup. Is that why they make makeup? Cover it up. Is that why they make makeup? It's to enhance. Not to cover up. You sure about that? That's what it is? So what you're saying is that just because you cover something up don't mean you're ashamed of it?
Right.
Okay, all right. I don't know. I don't wear makeup, so maybe I should. I don't need to enhance nothing. Then why do so many people try to enhance the gospel? We're going to call it that. They're trying to enhance it by putting some makeup on it. See, here's the thing. Most people, when we think of the word ashamed, we think of its general meaning, which is to hide. You're ashamed of something, so you hide it. Right? You don't put your business in the street because you're ashamed of it. I know this to be true because a lot of us talk our business. But we only talk the business we want everybody to know. What do we do with the rest of it? We hide it. We hide it. And so I'm coming from the perspective of when it comes to the gospel, with Christians, we are ashamed in general. I'm not saying everyone. Matter of fact, I know no one in here is ashamed of the gospel. Right? No one in here has ever had a discussion that someone might call religious, and you didn't get that warm feeling up the back of your neck, that nervous perspiration that starts to trickle down, your chin, your neck, and you feel it in your underarms, and you never had that. You never been at a loss for words, knowing what you should say, but finding yourself unable to say it. When you're standing around your friends, family, co-workers, and they're saying ungodly things and you laugh along with them because you're not ashamed of the gospel. You've just gone into your secret agent mode. Secret agent Christians. I'm undercover. I'm uncovering ungodly things, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to present the gospel because, after all, I'm not ashamed of it. I just enhanced it. Is that the way most Christians think? Because the truth of the matter is, I believe that most Christians simply hide the gospel. And if you're hiding the gospel, you must be ashamed of the gospel. So when we are ashamed of something, we're going to do one or two things. We're either going to hide it or we're going to cover it. Now, I understand makeup is an enhancement. You all have taught me that. You're not trying to conceal or cover anything, even though when I look at the makeup, it says conceal and cover, but you're not. I haven't seen makeup yet that said enhance, but I understand. So ladies, don't get mad at me. Keep enhancing yourselves. We're proud of it. right? We ain't ashamed of it at all. So we keep on doing that. But when it comes to the gospel, it doesn't need any makeup. It doesn't need any enhancing. It doesn't need any of that type of thing. So let's stop covering it. And how we're going to stop covering it has to do everything with our faith. When Paul gets to this point in this letter, he begins verse 16 by saying something that most of us have heard that Paul has said, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel." But it's how he gets to this point that's most important. We know the background of Romans by now. We understand the political nature. We understand that there was all of these intellectual thinkers there in Rome, and that this would be the place to present the gospel. There was a church there, but everybody was thinking about Paul, this Roman citizen, Paul, this champion of the faith, Paul, who wasn't there. It would seem that Paul would try to get there. But there's some things that are going on in this introduction that should help us to understand why Paul says, "I'm not ashamed." First of all, in verse 1, we find out that the gospel is God's, it's not ours. Because verse 1, it says, "separated to the gospel of God." It's funny how we act when something isn't ours, when it's somebody else's. If it's somebody else's, in a lot of cases, we can't care anything about it. We don't care nothing about it. How many of y'all go off and brag on other people's kids? That's not a lot. A lot of people do. You might do it every now and then, but I guarantee it's because you got a relationship with that kid. Your own kids, you brag about. Or you're ashamed of. You can always tell who's ashamed. Because they ain't never got nothing to say about the kid. Right? And you always know what they're proud about because they're proclaiming something good. I'm always talking about Trent's grades. It embarrasses her, but I do. I'm proud of her. I'm just totally proud of her. The people probably sick of me talking about her. He think his child is everything. Yes, I do. Shouldn't you think your child is something? There's nothing wrong with that, but you're right. There's nothing wrong with it. But why in the world, when it comes to Jesus, we ain't got nothing to say? I know, not y'all. Not y'all. I'm talking to folks on Facebook Live. You can't say nothing good about God or Jesus. What is the problem? But Paul says, I can show you what the problem is. First of all, it's not yours. Secondly, in verse 3, he says the gospel concerns Jesus. It doesn't really concern us. We sing the song. It's not about us. It's about Jesus. Verse 3 says, concerning his son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. That is what the gospel is about. Most people don't like that because they want the gospel to be about them. They want the gospel to be about their success. Most people actually witness that way. You know that? Most people actually go out and talk about themselves and have little to say about Jesus when it comes to witnessing. When in fact, the gospel is actually about him. You present the gospel in this way. It is about him and what he did, why he died, why you need him. Amen. When it comes to me, I needed him the same way you need him. That's what it's about. It's not about me, it's about him. The part that we really don't like is in verse 5. The gospel produces faithful obedience. It says obedience to the faith. We don't want to be obedient. Nobody goes around and brags about somebody in authority over them. Nobody goes around and talks about somebody having authority over them. Who brags about that? Who goes out and spreads that? There's somebody in authority over me and I'm obedient to them. We don't present the gospel in that way. No, we like to talk about freedom. That's what we like to talk about. I'm free in Jesus. What does that mean? Free to do what? Yes, I like that, Dave. Free to obey. That's what we're free to do. We're free to obey. I said it this morning. I have this feeling that as Christians, we hear that word grace, and we think in terms of just favor, period. And we say to ourselves, I have favor with God, which must mean that I can do whatever I want to. You know, when you have favor, people start thinking of things like, I can go places, I have favor, I can get in where anybody else can't. That somehow or another God does things, I want you to catch what I said. He does things just for me, just things. There's another book that's written out there that has the connotation of being Christian that talks about how God will do things for you like give you parking spaces, I think I'm going to throw up. Y'all didn't know that? There's a book out there like that. Yeah. God will give you a parking space. Just drive down to the front and cut off the elderly lady who can't walk well and get your space. We put God in this box of favoritism, and we miss something. We're supposed to be obedient. What does that look like? What does that mean? That means I'm supposed to do what he says. Then the fourth thing. The gospel sets us apart. We see that in verse 7. We're called to be saints. That means we've been set apart. Set apart from what? Everything else. Set apart from it. We don't like that. We want to be included in the crowd. We like to be a part of it. We don't want to be set out where someone can see us. We don't like that unless we're set up. Most people don't like to be set out. They like to be set up. Set me up where people can glorify me. Don't set me apart where people can look at me and say there's something strange and peculiar about you. And most of us witness that way. We witness that way. We want glory for ourselves. God has blessed me tremendously. God has set me up. No, God has set you apart. And if God has set you apart, you need to stop acting like everybody else. See, this good news thing, this gospel thing will have you messed up if you don't get it right. You didn't come to Jesus to be set up. You came to Jesus to be set apart. Because everybody else is going to hell. Set me apart from that, please. And then you get down to verse 13. And Paul says three significant things from 13 to 15. He says that he planned, he says that he's in debt, and he says that he's ready. Look in verse 13. Now I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that I often planned to come to you, but was hindered until now, that I might have some fruit among you also, just as among the other Gentiles. And notice what he says. He says, my plan is to come to you, but for a purpose. I plan to come to you to get this fruit. What is this fruit? I plan to come to you to see Romans get saved. How many of you actually go through life planning to see people get saved? Or are you planning to see what you can get out of God? You're planning your next promotion. You're planning your next uplift in your being. You're planning your next level. Christians get me nervous when they start, I'm going to another level. What level is that? Because it's probably a personal level that gives you something personal that has nothing to do with his glory. Instead, what Paul says is, I'm making plans, and my plans are to get there because I want to see people get saved. He says the reason I want to do that is because I'm in debt. Because God has given me something wonderful. I used this analogy before, but I'm going to use it again. When you get wonderful news, if it's wonderful to you, you'll tell it. Amen. Don't walk by Macy's and it's 90% off. Be all over Facebook. Text, calls. You start calling people. You wouldn't even text. Send a group text and start calling those closest to you. You need to get down here. This is good. It's 90% off in Macy's. 90% off of everything. And this is not good enough to text about. You don't have to go to hell. I don't get it. What do we miss? I know it's not y'all in here. What are we missing? I'm in debt. I've been given this thing. I'm in debt to the one that gave it to me because he gave it to me and he said, now I want you to give it to others. And then I'm in debt to them because they need it. Who in here does not need heaven? Who in here does not need to avoid hell? Is there anyone that does not need to avoid hell? So we're all in need. And if you are avoiding hell through him, and he's given it to you, and he told you to give it to somebody else, then you're in debt. So Paul says, I've planned, I'm in debt, and then he says, I'm ready. Verse 15. So as much as is in me, I am ready to preach the gospel to you who are in Rome also. Let me help you out with this. I always run into this question of preaching. What does it mean to preach, and who should do it? Everyone that is saved should be a preacher. Everyone that is saved should be a preacher. It means to proclaim. Keruso in the Greek means to proclaim. Everybody that is saved should be proclaiming the gospel. Everyone should be ready to do it. You know what happens when you're ready? You're prepared. who in here prepares themselves to spread the gospel? I mean, you prepare yourself for everything else. I mean, some of you wouldn't go to church unless you went to the hairdresser first to get your head prepared. And by the way, you can come in here with a bad hairdo and still get everything you need. Your hair looking good ain't going to make nothing else better, is it? But you prepare anyway. You'll prepare like that. You will make sure that some of you know that you have to get your clothes out the night before in order to get here on time today. Right? And you prepare yourself. But who gets up in the morning and gets down on their knees and prays in preparation for who they might meet?
Amen. Thank you, Lord.
Who they might see? Who gets down on their knees and says, I need to live this gospel so that others can see it? I need to prepare myself. You get up prepared to do other things. I know you do. Not y'all in here, I'm talking to them. You get up, you go to work prepared to get into it with somebody. You get prepared on your way. You're talking to yourself. When I get there, I'm going to tell them, don't mess with me today. I'm sick of it. You ever done that one? You ever, on your way, I'm tired of it. And you just getting ready to have a fight. You'll get ready to have a fight, but you won't get ready to spread the gospel. Paul says, I'm ready. See, if you're ready to spread the gospel, part of being prepared to do that is you can't be ashamed. That's why he says in verse 16, for I am not ashamed. Paul, how is it that you're not ashamed? He says, you gotta understand, I planned on this. I prepared myself. Man, I'm in debt. I got a debt to pay. I'm ready to pay my debt. What would happen if a bill collector called you and you said, I'm ready to pay my debt? You'd probably scare the bill collector. Probably put you on hold and tell somebody I got a live one. But he says, I'm not ashamed, but he says, I'm not ashamed for a couple of reasons. We want to see those reasons here. He says, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. That's reason number one. Now, I want you to catch what he said. He says, it is the dunamis. That's the Greek word. Dunamis is where we get the words dynamic and dynamite. Now, I want you to understand what this means. When you put dynamite on something, nothing happens. But if you light it, it makes a change. I want you to understand what the power of the gospel is. The gospel changes things. What does the gospel change? People. It changes the unsaved into the saved. It changes folks going to hell into going to heaven. I mean, the gospel is so good, it changes saved people into obedient people. That was back up there in verse number 5. If you get the gospel that saves you, that dynamite will blow up and save you. Then that dynamite will blow up again and change you and make you obedient. But you got to get the dynamite. You got to get the dynamite. But please understand what Paul is saying. Paul is saying the gospel is the dynamite. But you'll miss something. He said it is the power or the dynamite of God to salvation for everyone who what? Believes. That's how you like it. That's how you like it. If there's no belief, if there's no faith, then it's null and void. It don't do nothing if you don't believe it. See, I think what happens with us, we get saved, we have struggles with obedience because we don't even want the gospel nowhere around us. You know what happens if you carry dynamite? There's a chance. If you shake it up, it'll blow up. I think that's why most of us don't want to read the Bible. We're afraid it might blow up on us. It might explode, and we might find ourselves obeying what we didn't want to obey. We might find ourselves changed in ways we didn't really want to change. That's what's wrong with us when we don't change. We don't want to change. I love how we use lip service. We say things we don't believe. I want to be holy. Do you really? Who in there wants to be holy? Watch you get it. Some of y'all are honest, man. I don't know. Oh no, some of y'all, I know what you're sitting there going, what do holy mean? Before I commit myself to saying I want to be something, what does holy mean? Holy means set apart. Holy means you're set apart from sin. You're set apart. You got to get this. I said this in Bible study Wednesday night. I think everybody kind of caught this. When you read the Bible, especially when you read the New Testament, you find out the issue is sin.
Yes.
Really, that's it. You like the whole New Testament is written about sin. We are set apart so that we don't. What's going to change me? This gospel. How's it going to change me? You got to believe it. But it's funny, later on in Romans, we're going to find out how can you believe without a preacher. What that means is how can you believe without it being proclaimed? You got to hear it in order to believe it. Let me help you. Be your own preacher. Pick up your Bible. Let it preach to you. Let it proclaim to you. Read that book. I say this over and over, and I laugh about it, and I think about it. I will bet, now y'all won't hear, but I will bet most Christians don't read their Bible. I will bet that. I bet they listen to songs. You know, listen to songs is kind of easy. It's fun. Nice. It evokes feelings. You get the right beat. You good. The words in songs sometimes are very simple. A lot of our gospel songs are not hard-hitting. But when you pick up the word will knock the mess out of you. Right? It'll slap you all in the face. It'll cut you. That Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews said it'll cut you. See, if you get into the word and you ever been cut, that'll make you change something. Cut something off. That's what the word does. So I understand that it's the power of God to salvation. It's going to change some things. I go from being on my way to hell and realizing now I was on my way, because most people on their way to hell don't know it. Now I realize I was, but the gospel has changed me to understand that I now have heaven, and my behavior should follow. The second thing he says, not only is the power of God to everyone who believes for salvation, he says for the Jew first and also for the Greek. He's simply saying that the gospel was presented first to the Jews and spread out to everybody else. Verse 17, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed. Now, when you first read that, you might mistake the righteousness of God. This is not talking about a characteristic of God. This is not saying you will see how righteous God is, because that don't make any sense. Because he's the standard.
Yeah.
See, that don't make any sense. It's not about how righteous he is. Couldn't be any more right. He is right. By just who his nature he is, who he is. That would be like me saying, I'm going to be more Kevin. I can't be more Kevin. That's not it. This is a reference to what it takes to meet God's righteous standard. That's how you got to look at that. You got to understand that the gospel will tell you and reveal. You know, when something is revealed, that means it was hidden, and now it's open to you to understand what it takes to actually meet the standard that God has said for a person to be right before him. Well, let me step back for a moment and let me explain this to you. Here's the deal. You and I are not right. Have you ever been not right? Has your child ever been not right in front of you? When they're not right, they what? Wrong. We are not right. God has set a standard, and if you want to know what that standard is, I'll sum it up for you in these words. Love him with everything in you, and love your neighbors yourself. You ain't done that. You ain't done that. You didn't do the first one, even though you think you did, and you sure haven't done the second one. Even though you might say you're a nice person, you ain't done the second one. So we're not right. Okay? So now we're standing before a holy God, perfection, who says, this is my standard. My standard is perfection, and you're not right. Well, Lord, how do I get right? You can't get right. This is one of the things about the gospel that we miss. You can't get right. You ever heard somebody make that crazy statement, when I get right, I'll go to church? For what? Because if you get right and come in, you probably going to be tainted. Because there's a lot of wrong people in the place where you're trying to come to because you done got right. I mean, if you get right, go to heaven.
Amen.
People come in here because they're trying to get right. They don't come in here to get right. They come in here because they're trying to get right. They're not coming in here because they're right. You're wrong. So we stand before a holy God. He stands as a judge, and we are unrighteous. We're not right. And so what happens is God says, here's the penalty. The penalty is death. And therefore, you got to pay the penalty. And then we're sitting there and we're like pleading our case. Lord, please, I don't want to die. He says, well, it's got to be paid. And then he gets up, takes off his judge robe, puts on a lamb's robe, walks around, stands next to you and says, I'll die for this one, talking to himself. And then he answers himself and says, I'll accept your sacrifice because you are right and perfect. And then that one that's standing next to us, that lamb, says, now I'll take my rightness and put it on them so that they are now just. Because you require justice, now this person is justified. See, you got to understand these terms. In order for you to be righteous, you have to be justified. Mm-hmm. And all of this is positional because underneath the covers, you know you're still wrong. Yeah, man. But since your lifestyle is such a shameful thing, God had to put some makeup, God had to cover you, conceal you underneath himself. And that's called being positionally righteous. And underneath the covers, you're trying to live up to what he's put you in positionally. Does that make sense? See, that's what happened. When you read Genesis, you see it very plainly. When you look at Adam and Eve, and the Bible says they were naked and not what? Ashamed. They were not ashamed. But once they realized they were naked, they became ashamed. See, once you realize you're a sinner, you ought to be ashamed. Once you realize. See, before salvation, you weren't ashamed of your sin. I mean, people walking around right now just proclaiming sinful things. Think about all of the ungodly things that you see on a daily basis. Think about all of the ungodly things that are celebrated. Just step back for a second and think about it. Now ask yourself this question. Do I buy into all of that? And I'm a Christian. I'm saved, sanctified. Right? I've been set apart. But yet I'll buy into whatever the world is saying. This whole shameful thing. I want you to go to Mark chapter 8, verse 31. Jesus will explain why we are so shamed and why we struggle with this righteous thing. Mark chapter 8, verse 31. When you're there, say amen. Amen. All right. Now, and he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and after 3 days rise again. So Jesus is teaching his disciples, all right? He's teaching the 12. This is what I got to go through. By the way, what he's teaching the 12 is the gospel. He's telling them this is what's got to happen in order for you all to get saved. Now, is that a good thing? It is. Now, it's a tough, hard thing that he's got to die, but it's a good thing for us that he does. But if you're not careful, you'll miss something because he says in 3 days, I'll rise again. But then Peter, you see that? Verse 32 says he spoke these words openly. Then Peter. Now, I've always said this about Peter. Peter always put his foot in his mouth. We know that. Peter's always speaking up. But see, Peter was just saying what was on everybody else's mind. We always look at Peter, but the rest of them were thinking it. Peter, you ever had somebody speak what you think? And then everybody looks at them as being the troublemaker. Have you ever been that person? Anybody ever been, everybody like, I'm sick of this. You too, me too. But somebody needs to say something. Yeah, let's all go. And then all you go, but one of you speaking, the others act like I ain't got nothing to do with it. That's Peter's life with Jesus. Peter's speaking up there. That's why he was the de facto leader. He was the one that spoke up. The rest of them were too scared. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. How do you rebuke God? He rebuked God. In my mind, my sanctified imagination, I see him grabbing Jesus and shaking him. We ain't going to do that. We ain't going to let you die. We all going to go to hell. Is that what he's saying? No, they ain't going to kill you. We just going to go to hell. He didn't understand. Now, he turned around, verse 35, but when he had turned around and looked at his disciples, notice who he looked at. Who did he look at? The disciples. He rebuked Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan." Peter was under the influence of Satan. Peter was under the influence of Satan. I'm going to say it one more time. Peter was under the influence of Satan. He was doing a satanic thing. Now, Jesus is about to explain what a satanic thing looks like. For you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. This is where shame comes into the gospel. The gospel is contrary. You know what contrary means? Against man's thinking. The gospel is counterintuitive to man's way of thinking. Everything in the gospel goes against what the world says is right. And you have a choice in a decision that you're going to make. Are you going to love the world, or are you going to love this gospel? Are you going to love the things of the world, or are you going to love the gospel? Remember, the gospel is of God, about Christ. So in essence, are you going to love the world, or are you going to love God? Are you going to fall and wither and be shaky and not be able to hold yourself together when somebody starts talking about things like homosexuality? Can you not say what the gospel says and love it? Or do you fall prey to this? A satanic influence that tells you this is the way that you live your life. You be concerned with what men think. See, this is what happens to us when we go to witness, by the way. Satan comes along and tries to tell us, you know, people don't like it when you get religious. You shouldn't talk religion in politics. He's so slick, he threw politics in there so you wouldn't concentrate just on the religious aspects of things. And then I'm sitting over here looking at that going, but I don't talk religion, I talk relationship. Christianity is not a religion. It's never been an ism. So it's not a religion. It's a relationship. Christianity is a salvific thing. It's a lifeboat, a lifeline. It's that thing you blow up when you fall into the water. You know, it's called a life jacket. That's what Christianity is. It's the only way out. It's the escape. Why would I make it into a religion? I won't talk religion to you because I don't have one.
Amen. Amen.
All I've got is a relationship. And the one that I relate to has told me to tell you about him. It's not a religion. Don't fall for that. I'm not worried about what you think about me. Even my relationship has told me when they get mad at you, they ain't mad at you. Don't worry about that. They're upset with me. What's happening is I'm ashamed because I'm worried about what men think. But watch this. If you got it in your study Bible, it says the cost of discipleship. Now look at verse 54. When he had called the people to himself, with his disciples also, he said to them, now pay close attention, whoever desires to come after me, so this is Christians, you're going to be a disciple of Christ, let him what? Deny himself. Let him talk about you. Let people say they don't like you. Deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel will save it. He just gave you a hint. How do I lose my life for your sake? The gospel. Present the gospel. They'll want to kill you for it. That's suicide, ain't it? No. Because he just said, if you're willing to lose it, I'll save it. Yes. How do I lose it, Lord? Present the gospel. You present, they ain't going to like you. Look, if you present the gospel and they like you, you put makeup on it. You enhanced it. You changed it. You tweaked it. You've added to it. You kept something out of it. Don't do that with the gospel. Present the gospel and be ready to lose your life, but don't worry about it. Then he says, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul. What he's saying is, you're so busy out there trying to please people, you know what you're trying to do? You're trying to gain favor of the world. Okay, what would you rather have? The world love you and your soul be lost? Let me put it this way. The world love you and you burn eternally? Or would you rather have him and live forever? Real simple. Matter of fact, it doesn't really need an answer. I think it's rhetorical. For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, that's the gospel. See, here's the thing. Jesus equates his words to him. Because we got a lot of Christians that ain't ashamed to say Jesus, but they're ashamed to say what he teaches. Y'all catch that? They ain't ashamed to say, I love Jesus. They're not ashamed to say I'm a Christian, but then they have the nerve to say my faith is personal. I told you, if I hear another politician say that mess, I'm going to say, see, you're so ashamed to stand up there and say that you are actually a Christian and you follow Jesus. You want to be elected so bad, you're so ashamed of them. What you say is, well, I'm a Christian. That's for those of y'all that are going to vote Christian. But for you non-Christians, my faith is personal. But how can I be a Christian if I'm not spreading the gospel? Because that's a part of my Christianity. And if I really believe what the gospel says, and I'm a politician, I speak, thus said the Lord, because he's going to put me where he wants me to be. I win the election not by your vote, but by God putting me there. It's that way for all of us. You at work, I don't want them to know I'm a Christian, they might not promote me. Well, you know what? You'll probably get that promotion. But you got to stand before him one day. And he said, if you're ashamed, I'm going to be ashamed. Isn't it funny how Jesus does that to us? We act like there's no consequences to the actions that we take. But he's literally saying, if you're going to act that way, then I'm going to act that way. Some of you do your kids that way. How many of y'all ever said to your kid, you're going to act a fool in public? I'm going to beat you in public. I know my mama was that way. Oh, you going to act up and make me look bad? And see, that was back in the day when you could, almost kill your child in public. I mean, somebody might slip a stick to you. You know what's wrong with the world today, man? The folks got their camera out. Got you on Facebook. Police knocking at your door. That's why he says, for whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation. The reason he says adulterous, he's saying you're supposed to be loving God, but you're loving the world. Of him, the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Ooh. When he comes in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. You know what that is? We call it the second coming. The second coming. He's saying, I'm going to be ashamed. So as a Christian, I got to ask myself a question. Am I really saved? The reason I say that is, this is part of that test of your salvation. If you're really saved, would you actually be ashamed of the gospel? No. Could you be ashamed of going to heaven? Could you be ashamed of knowing you've got what everybody else needs in order to get there? I mean, you couldn't even be so callous as to say, I got mine, you got to get yours. I've heard some folks say that. How did you get yours? Because you didn't work for it. You couldn't do anything to deserve it. He just gave it to you, and he said, all you got to do is go tell somebody else about it. I mean, if you were walking through the mall and somebody handed you a $100 bill and said, tell whoever you want to, I got some more, you'll be telling strangers. You know how I know that's true? Because when you go to the fair, who's ever been to the fair? You go to the fair, and it's fun when you first get there, and after a few hours, you're tired. You've been walking, you've seen enough. But you messed up, and you bought too many coupons. You're full, you don't want to eat no more, you don't want to play any more of them trick games. You just want to leave and get out. On your way out, what do you do with your coupons? Strangers, complete strangers. what you paid for. And God gives you something free and you don't want to give it away. Y'all will probably remember that fair one, won't you? So come on back. Come on back. So we look in verse 17 and he says, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed. So we get this revealed, how God wants us to live, what the process is, what the gospel is, all of that is revealed. It shows us what it takes in order to have God, to be in that relationship. And then he says this thing here, and this is what I really want to get you, from faith to faith. What in the world does that mean? From faith to faith. It's real simple. You came in by faith. You didn't come in by works. You came in by believing, period. Faith is what? The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You have not seen Jesus, nor have you seen the Father. But you have faith in what Jesus did. That got you saved. But the gospel doesn't stop with your salvation. Many people make the mistake of saying the gospel is simply this. Jesus came, Jesus died, Jesus was resurrected. That's not all of the gospel. The gospel is that and every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. This whole Bible is the gospel. It's not just that. When Jesus left here, what was he telling his disciples to do? Go out and do what? Make more of you. How do you do that? First of all, he says baptize. That means get them saved. And then the second thing he says is teaching them to observe all things. All things. See, that whole notion of I'm saved, give me a shack in the back, I don't need no rewards and all that don't make no sense. Because there's no way to be saved and not act like you're saved. It's impossible. Now, you can act like you're saved and not be, but you can't be saved and then act like you ain't. I want y'all to consider that for a moment. Think about what I'm saying, because some of y'all are like, did you say what I think you said? Yes. I didn't say you wouldn't mess up from time to time. I said a total, I ain't going to act like I'm saved. I'm not saying you won't get caught up in sin sometimes. I'm talking about a total, I'm saved and I can care less attitude. I'm saved, just give me a shack in the back, I'm going to do what I want to do. No, that's not salvation. That's called foolishness. That's called self-deception. That's called you haven't really heard the gospel. That's called you a mess. You in trouble. Because here's the fact. You think you're saved. That's a bad place to be. Isn't that what Jesus said to the church at Laodicea? Yeah. He said, like, man, I wish you were warm. I wish you were hot or cold. Because if you're hot, I know you're hot for me. If you were cold, I know you're against me. See, at least that way you know your position. But y'all warm. You think you're what you're not. It's the most difficult person in the world to deal with is somebody that thinks they're saved. See, most of your evangelism is probably ends up with people like that. You ever try to talk to somebody and tell you, I go to church so-and-so and my pastor so-and-so. What does your pastor and your church have to do with you being saved? There's a lot of people going to church that have a pastor that are not saved. Pastor ain't saved either. Faith to faith. The gospel is activated by faith. That's that dynamis that's blowing up. Otherwise, it's just a set of facts. And I want you to understand, too, the gospel is presented as being objective, not subjective. It is objective. The difference between the two is this. If it's objective, it's fact. It's just facts. This is the fact. Jesus died. That's a fact. Jesus was in the grave. That's a fact. Jesus got up. That's a fact. Subjective would mean that it was an opinion. And a lot of people are witnessing to people like it's your opinion. It's not your opinion. It's a fact. If you tell somebody water's wet, do you need to argue about it? I mean, who would argue with somebody about water's wet? No, I don't believe water's wet. Well, how are you going to argue with that? Well, I guess you get a glass of water and throw it on them. Ask them how wet they are. Here's the thing with Jesus. Jesus got up. I don't believe that. Well, he did. Well, how do you know he got up? Because he did. You ain't got to go through a bunch of... Look, he never told you to argue about facts. We get caught up in arguing about facts. I don't believe the Bible. Well, that's... Okay. That don't mean it ain't. I don't believe God exists. That don't mean he don't. It's a fact. He does. How do you know? Because I know. Well, how do you know? Because I know. Just like I know me. Now I got to prove me to you? I used this with one person one time, a long time ago. They told me God didn't exist. I said, I got a brother. His name is Eric. Do you believe me? And that knucklehead said, yeah. I said, how are you going to believe my brother that you've never seen? That you don't know if I just made up. But when it comes to God, if I tell you that God is real, all of a sudden God isn't. How can you have an opinion on that one and can't have an opinion on my brother being real or not? Why didn't you say, prove your brother to me? I wish he would have, because I would have said, well, he just is. Maybe one day you'll meet him, and maybe you won't. God just is. And one day you will meet him. Period. In the story. It's how you meet him. That's going to be the thing. A fact, you will meet him. The Bible says every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess. Every single one, you go meet him. So you can sit here and talk about he ain't real or not, but I'm not going to argue with you about it. I'm just going to tell you what the gospel says, because it's a fact. The just shall live by faith. The just shall live by faith. I just told you who the just were, and it says we're going to live by faith. If I came in by faith, I need to live by faith. All right, turn to Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 17. We'll get out of here. Find verse 1. Luke chapter 17. Find verse 1. When you found it, say amen. How fast it can be. All right, Luke chapter 17, verse number 1. 18:7. All right. Then he said to the disciples, it is impossible that no offense should come, but woe to him through whom they do come. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and that he were thrown into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. Take heed, that's important, to yourselves, because I'm talking about you offending. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him, and if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in a day. I don't know of anybody that got messed over 7 times in one day. In a day, and 7 times in a day, return to you saying, I repent. You shall forgive him. Understandably, the disciples, who weren't as mature as you all are, said in verse 5, and the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. Because what you just said, that goes beyond anything I can do. The just shall live by faith. I need my faith increased, because your gospel is telling me to do some things that my old man says, okay, hold on. Let's use some common sense. See, as a Bible teacher, I get that one a lot. Hold on. Common sense is not God's sense. See, that's the problem with common sense. That's the things of man. Your common sense is stupid. God is the only one making perfect sense. Now, God just said 7 times in a day. If they keep coming back going, forgive me, and some people in that, because we've gone over forgiveness, I don't know, 33 times. And some people in right now going, well, we back on this again? Man, come on. This don't make no sense. We'll be like them, increase our faith. Now, his answer will throw you off. So the Lord said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be pulled up by the roots and be planted in the sea, and it will obey you. Now, he's not saying believe in the outcome. He's telling them this. It's just like the whole thing about the mountain. What he's saying is when it comes to the gospel, because that's where your faith is supposed to be, if there's anything that hinders you believing it, if you'll just have faith in the gospel, that's just like saying to this tree, get up and go over there, and it goes. It will happen. It will work. All you got to do is believe it. Just believe it. When it comes to the gospel, just believe it. You say you can't forgive, just believe it. You know who your obstacle is? It's you. Amen. That's your problem. It's you caught up in your old man. Believe the gospel and stop believing your flesh. It's this, listen, he's saying, it's this powerful. If you'll just believe it, that dynamis takes place. Something will explode. And when it explodes, you'll find yourself as a forgiving individual. And let me tell you what happens on the other side of finding yourself there. What you'll realize is, man, it was just a simple decision. I'm going to do what he said and not do what I think. Don't you wish your child would be that way? Think about it. Your 5-year-old. Just do what I say and stop trying to do what you think. If you do what I say, you'll be all right. You'll figure it out afterwards. It's always after. I used to tell mine all the time, if you just do what you're told, you wouldn't go through all this other stuff. You'll find out one day when you do what you're told, you don't go through all that other stuff. And then when you find that out, you know what you're going to say? I need to stop listening to me. Because I'm really not all there. I mean, that's what God wants you to come to the conclusion of. I'm really not all there. That's why he said, let this mind be in you. He didn't tell you to keep, he said, look, your mind's messed up. Let this mind be in you. That's what he's saying here. Now, wait, but he goes on. And which of you, having a servant plowing or tending sheep, will say to him when he has come in from the field, come at once and sit down to eat. Now, you're like, well, wait a minute. Where's he going with this? I don't get this. He went to the faith thing. Now he got this whole thing about a servant. What is he saying? He's saying, look, he's saying, let me help you understand. What if you have a servant? You have a servant who works in the fields and they fix your meals. They're your servant. So they've been out in the fields doing what they needed to do and they come in. Do you look at the servant who's supposed to be fixing you something to eat, and do you say to that servant when they come in from the field, now you sit down and eat. I'm going to sit over here hungry. That's your servant. How did they get up in the field in the first place? You commanded them to go. How is it that they fix your meals? You command them to fix your meals. So watch what he says. But will he not rather say to him, prepare something for my supper, and gird yourself, get yourself ready, and serve me till I have eaten and drunk, and afterward you will eat and drink. You know what you do with your servant? They come in, you say, hey, it's time for dinner. I'd like to have this tonight. Why? Because they're your servant. Who goes to a restaurant and waitress or waiter comes and you look at them and say, why don't you sit down and eat? And when you get through eating, I guess I can eat. You don't do that. So he's not being mean. But then he says, does he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I think not. This is where we trip up with God. We want God we want God to appreciate it when we do what he's commanded us to do. We want points. We want points so that when we don't get it right, well, at least I got that. You ought to be thankful. I showed up for church, so what? Look, I showed up. Yeah, I fell asleep, but I showed up. Pastor Harris was born this morning. I showed up. I'm sure he preached the gospel, but I showed up. Don't I get points for showing up? No. Because I told you forget not this sibling. Why am I going to say thank you for doing what I told you to do? You my servant. You missed something. Jesus said when he came to serve. What did he leave you to do? Serve. Oh, but he didn't stop there. I think not. So likewise, you, when you have done all those things which you are commanded, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done what was our duty to do. Now, we're looking at profit here the wrong way, I think. Sometimes we read that like they're saying something negative. They're not saying anything negative. They're saying, what have we done other than what he's commanded us to do? What have we done? If we do everything he commands us to do, we haven't profited him anything. We've simply done what he commanded us to do. And what Jesus is saying here, he said, you want your faith increased? Here's the deal. Just do what you're commanded to do. That's your increase of faith. Because God has not asked you to do more than he has commanded you to do. What you're saying when you say increase my faith, you're acting like, God, I need to go above and beyond because I can't do your commandments. So if you'll increase my faith and I can get to your commandments, you should be thankful that I have done your commandments. And Jesus is like, look, y'all want your faith increased? Here it is. I'm going to increase your faith. You're a servant. Do what you're told to do. That's your increase of faith. It's kind of like you telling your child something along these lines. I need you to go and wash them dishes. And the child looks at you and says, okay, you want me to wash the dishes? I will wash the dishes when you give me $10. And what do you say? I'll tell you what, we'll work it out this way. First, I'm going to hit you.
Amen.
Then after you wash the dishes, I'm going to take the $10 that you have from you. Because I already gave you $10. God is saying, I've given you salvation, and I commanded you to do something. You owe me something. You can't pay me. And here you are looking for something. What do you want? What do you want? Do what I've commanded you to do. Lord, I need faith. You want me to forgive some folks. How in the world am I going to forgive folks? I forgave you.
Amen.
And here's the sad part. You know I forgave you, and you still mess up. And guess what? I keep forgiving you because you mess up with me more than 7 times a day. I mean, you cussed out a whole group of folks. And I died for that. And now you coming back telling me it's too hard. I can't do it. You better do what I commanded you to do. You want your faith increased? Here it is. I'm going to increase it. You're my servant. I've given you a command. Do the command, and you'll find that your faith is increased. Amen. Boy, when you do my commands, that's just like having faith that'll move a mountain, that'll move a tree and put it over in the sea, unplant itself and go. It's that powerful. It's that powerful. All I got to do is what? Verse 5, back in Romans, get the gospel and be obedient to the what? The faith. Come back. For the just shall live by faith. So how am I going to live? I'm going to live in obedience to the gospel by faith. Lord, please increase my faith because you want me to forgive folks. You want me to love people. You want me to turn the other cheek. That seems wimpy and weak to me. Does it really? They were whooping me. They put bones and metal in the whip. They whooped me so bad my ribs were showing. They spit on me. Oh, by the way, it was Praetorian Guard that spit on me. It wasn't 1 or 2. Let's try 50. They put a crown around me. Blood ran down into the spittle on my face. And here I am, the king of the universe. And they put a robe on me and said, here he is, king of the Jews. They hit me with reeds and said, come on now, tell us who did it. And I went through all of that. And then they made me carry that piece of wood all the way to the cross and put me on it. And I got up there, and you know what? I didn't complain one time. Even when the angels were so angry and ready to come down and tear up everything, I looked to the Father because the angels looked to the Father. And I looked to the Father and I said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And you're going to tell me you can't forgive somebody for the little stuff they do to you? And you want your faith increased? Do what I commanded you to do. I'm going to tell you another way what he's saying to his disciples at that point. Shut up. You ain't got a leg to stand on. The just, if you've been justified, you're going to live by faith. So how do I take all of this from what I got in this introduction? First of all, accept God on his own terms. Accept the gospel on its own terms. Don't change it, don't move it, don't rearrange it. It's God's gospel. It ain't yours to change. It concerns his son. It ain't about you. And it is the power to save, period. And change your behavior. The gospel is not there to get you rich or any of that stuff. The gospel is there to change your behavior. I've told you, within the gospel, if you want to be rich, it tells you what to do. Go to work. That's what it says in Proverbs. Work. Want to be rich? Work. Second thing, You got to live the gospel. You can't look. You can't just hear it. You got to live it. You know what living the gospel means? You got to be obedient to the faith. If it says it, do it. That's what he's saying. He's not saying, look, listen to this very carefully. He's saying you obey it, period. This is how you obey it. You got to believe it. If you believe it, obey it. Then the dunamis power takes over. Things change. Things happen. And you realize when you obey it, first of all, you're going to realize it was a simple decision. Secondly, when you obey it, you'll see it wasn't really God trying to make you miss out on anything. It was God trying to show you what was. Because you were wrong. You just didn't know what right was. Obey him and you'll find out. Just live it. And lastly, share it. You are in debt to God. Do you understand that? You owe him. No, you can't pay him. But you still owe him. I mean, you have that relationship with the bank, some of you. Call a mortgage. Because the bank can come and say, give me my money. How many of y'all got it? How many of y'all can look at the bank and say, you know what? Yeah, no problem. I got that. Because if Bank of America came to me and said, give me my money, I'm like, I got to move. And even when I move, I still what? Owe them. I mean, I look at my salvation a lot like I look at a mortgage. I don't know if I'll ever be through with it. I may not ever be able to pay it back. But you know what's real cool about having a mortgage? I get to stay there. Right? So you know what he's saying? You owe me. You'll never be able to pay me, but I'm going to let you stay there. You owe me. You're indebted to me. And you're indebted to everybody you see. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you yourself want heaven, you ought to want it for everybody else. God bless you.
Amen.
All right, let's stand and come together. Amen. All right, so we are done with the introduction. We're going to move into the fact that God has a wrath. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks. We thank you, Lord, for all of those that are here. We thank you, Lord, for everyone that heard. We pray, Father, that your word goes out and does not come back void. That it touches somebody, changes someone. If there's someone that has heard this word that does not know you like they should, does not have the relationship that they should with you, we pray, Father, that your Holy Spirit will overcome them, that you will draw them to you. Lord, that they will come to us, come to someone, another Christian somewhere at some point in some time saying, what must I do to be saved? So that person can say, if God has shown you and you've come this far, you are. And then, Father, we pray that all of us get changed by your gospel, that we all of us experience the power that is wrapped up in your gospel. And it comes from faith. So, Father, the faith that it was that we needed to save us, Lord, help us to have the faith that we need to change and to become more like you. And then, Father, when we've got that faith, give us more faith.
Yes.
So we go from faith to faith to faith, because we are the just that should live by faith. Father, we give you thanks in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.